Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Author in Residence series on How to Be Bold, the Surprising Science of Everyday Courage. My name is Colin Mahan, and I'm a Director of Programs at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Center is a nonprofit improving access and knowledge in entrepreneurship to advance economic progress for all. As you're going to see in the chat in just a moment, the NASDAQ Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to help entrepreneurs fuel prosperity, no matter where their journey begins. Be sure to check out those links and resources shared in the chat. Now, we're going to launch a few polls to take a step back and take a temperature gauge on how all of you are doing today. The first one, how are you feeling about your business? Are you optimistic? Feeling a little survival mode, a little anxiety? Let us know. We use this information to guide the programs we provide for this global community of entrepreneurs. Also, if there are specific topics or challenges you'd like us to create resources for, feel free to share them in the chat. Ooh, looks like optimism is at the top of the key, but understand there's a little bit of survival mode and anxiety up there and a tiny bit of fear. Oof. Well, hopefully our talk today will help alleviate some of that sentiment. Couple more housekeeping items before we get started. Also, let us know where you're dialing in from by dropping it into the chat. Quincy, all right, awesome. You're already ahead of the game. New York City. We'd love to see where everyone's joining us for in our time together today. Houston, Texas, New York City, Bristol, Oklahoma, South Florida, Las Vegas, New York City, Sausalito, Salt Lake City, awesome, California, Boston. Welcome, everybody. Missouri, San Francisco, Philadelphia, all kinds of time zones. Love to see it. North Carolina, Atlanta, Dallas. Love it. Well, thank you for letting us know. Washington, D.C., they're still coming in. Great. Also, we're going to have live Q&A for our speaker near the end of this session, so please submit those questions for us in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. We'll do our best to get to as many as we can. Chicago, love that. New York City. The final poll, what's keeping you up at night? We use this to guide the next couple months of our programming, so thank you for voting for that. And while you're answering that final poll, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the incredible support of our corporate partners. The work we do at the center wouldn't be possible without all the generosity and belief of our partners and funders, including NASDAQ, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, KPMG, Walmart, the Asian Innovation Hub, Wilson Sonsini, the Nareet Foundation, and BPM. We're deeply grateful for their partnership and hope you'll share us in that appreciation as well. All right, this final poll, where are we at here? Looks like there's a pretty good mix of finance and marketing, but with some sales scale and pivot. So thank you for sharing that. We'll get right to getting some more workshops and speakers on those topics. Without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our special guest author today. Ranjay Gulati is a professor at Harvard Business School and author of the book we're talking about today, How to Be Bold, the Surprising Science of Everyday Courage. Ranjay, welcome.
Thank you, Colin. Pleasure to be here with all of you today. I'm delighted to have a chance to talk about my research.
Love it. Looking forward to it. And over to you. Your audio's coming in a little quiet, but I see you got your mic up, so you're perfect.
Okay. Hopefully, this is going to work. So let's dive right in. It's my pleasure to have a chance to talk about this project with you. I'm just going to share my slides so you'll be able to see what this project was all about. And I'll give you a few concepts as well to work with. And as Colin said, I'm going to go for about 35, 40 minutes, and then we'll have Q&A after that. So digging right in. My interest in this subject actually began when I started to look at a couple of things. First, I had, I was not studying courage per se. I was looking at what do companies do in down markets. I study growth And I was doing a sub study within that larger project of how do you build organizational growth on growth in down markets. So it was a very specific project. And what I was looking at was how everyone talks about growing in down markets, but no one does it. They all cut costs. So I wanted to see, do companies actually invest in down markets, and the ones that do they benefit? And the title of the article gives away the punchline, which is roaring out of recessions. To me, the surprising thing here was how small that number was of companies. Even though everyone intellectually knows it, they don't do it. Somehow fear, lack of courage, whatever you want to call it, kicks in. I was also doing a study at the time of fast growth ventures, unicorn type companies that have grown rapidly. And once again, I was trying to understand founders, kind of key inflection points, decisions, strategic decisions, organizational decisions, and how they navigated growth in these kind of crazy times. So I had this, and I had a third interest, which was I teach an MBA class on business transformation. And it's not just large companies. I mean, Ixigo is a unicorn out of India. I looked at Etsy in its earlier days. I looked at Lime as well in its earlier days. Sona Comstar in its early days before that IPO. But there were some big ones as well. And the one thing I found was when you're trying to really transform a business, you gotta have guts. But as I started to kind of reflect on this topic, my interest in this topic actually came from my own personal experience. I was confused even on what the word was. I had all these words out there. People saying, oh, fearless, courageous, audacious, valor, heroism, risk-taking. It actually came to me from my own personal story. So, I was a kid growing up in India. I was 14 years old. And, my mother at the time growing up, my mother had a business and she was very successful, and she had bought a piece of land outside New Delhi where she was finally going to have her home and build a design studio. She was a fashion designer working with a couple of high-end boutiques in Paris. So, this land turns out to become much more valuable because it became rezoned as residential, and the local developer was trying to take it away from her or buy it from her somehow. So one day I'm home from boarding school, and the guard from the gate comes to me and says, there's a gentleman outside insisting on seeing your mom. Could you talk to him? So I went to the gate, and he was from the developer, and I said, look, she's not going to meet you. And he said, only 5 minutes. We'll never bother her again. So I go and ask my mom. He's saying 5 minutes. She says, okay, fine, send him in. So she's sitting in the living room, and he comes. He's very polite and deferential, sits down across her, and immediately he takes out a checkbook, a signed check, and a piece of paper, and says, ma'am, look, we don't want to negotiate with you. We want to give you whatever you want. Just tell us what number you want to put on that check and sign that paper. My mother says, look, it's not about the money. I don't care about the money. It's really, I want that land. It's a great location. I love that location. I'm not going to sell. So don't waste your time. I've said it before. Immediately, he turns more belligerent. And I'm standing at the door. He says, I'm not going to leave here till you sign this paper. And my mother says, well, I'm really sorry. I'm not going to sign. So then he leans back, and he's wearing a blazer, and he pulls it back, and in his waist, he has a gun tucked in there. Now, I'm frozen. I'm thinking, what do I do? Should I call the guard? Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I jump him? Maybe he's bluffing. Maybe I'll wait. Maybe I'll do this. I'm frozen. I don't know what to do. In a nanosecond, my mother, 5'1" tall, bounces out of her seat, walks around, and slaps him across the face. And says, how dare you? How dare you come into my house and try to bully me into giving you my land, and now you try to threaten me with a gun? Get out of here now. Now, it was very strategic also, because in that commotion, the guard came running in. So he was there. This gentleman didn't know what hit him, and he ran out of there so fast he forgot his checkbook. Now, I asked my mother, I said, Mom, that was crazy. Didn't you see he had a gun? She said, yeah. I said, weren't you scared that he could shoot us? She says, yes. And then she said something that really rung in my head. She said, just because you're scared doesn't mean you do nothing. And, as a kid, I was 14, I didn't register, but that phrase rung in my head. Just because you're scared doesn't mean you do nothing. So this was the story of fear. But I have to confess, a little bit ashamed of myself because I didn't do anything. So, into this comes this idea about courage or taking action in the face of fear. You know, every culture celebrates courage. We're confused what courage is, by the way, because we think of courage as absence of fear. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is resourcing yourself in the face of fear. How do you take action in the face of fear? And people are not born fearless. Most people are not fearless. There's a fraction of people actually who have a mutation of sorts in them that who don't experience fear, but the rest of us do experience fear. And this is kind of part of my learning was that how, because the Hollywood likes to portray these actors and characters. This is Tom Cruise, who does most of his own stunts, riding a motorcycle off a cliff. And we think of this as absence of fear. We think it's a personality trait. We think it's physical prowess. Turns out none of those are true necessarily. Courage is taking action in the face of fear. Right? It's not a personality trait. We can learn it. We can become it. And that was a huge learning for me. And the last one is physical. It's not always physical. It also is moral and otherwise, intellectual too. And Tom Cruise himself, when he was asked, like, hey, do you get scared when you do these stunts? And his answer was, it's not that I don't get scared when I'm doing these things. It's that I don't mind being scared. Now, the thing is, when we think about fear and how this, unfolds, we think of the classic response to fear. So I also started this research, and everyone says, fight or flight, come on, fight or flight. Of course, mine was neither flight or fight. Mine was freeze. And I came to realize that actually that is the most common response we have. We freeze up. We don't know what to do. And sometimes we somehow believe that doing nothing is the safest option. It may not be, but we think that. It's then is flight, and occasionally is fight. Fear is a primal human emotion hardwired in the human brain, going back to primitive cave dweller days. And so it hijacks the amygdala and we don't even think clearly. So either we freeze up and say, let me wait and see, or we duck, or occasionally, if we have no other option, we fight. So I came to realize what I call is the fear equation, and this is just in the introduction of my book. I say, where does fear come from? So that was my next question. Where does fear come from? It turns out fear originates in what is called uncertainty. Uncertainty activates loss of control, which activates fear. Now, what is uncertainty? Think early days of COVID. For those who are old enough, not many over here, I think in this call, who know about the great financial crisis, that was uncertainty. Unknown. I don't know. And uncertainty is not the same as risk. There was a very famous economist who just wrote an entire essay, path-breaking essay, on the distinction between risk and uncertainty. Risk is where I know the distribution of outcomes, I can model it. Uncertainty is I don't know. Now, question you may want to ponder among all yourselves. Is there more uncertainty today or less? Well, if you believe public company CEOs, in a recent study of the last quarter earnings calls by public company CEOs, they used the word uncertainty 3 times more than they did in the previous year. It's everywhere. It's geopolitical uncertainty, it's political uncertainty, it's economic uncertainty, it's health uncertainty, it's technological uncertainty. And these are unknowns, right? Because uncertainty is like walking through the fog. There are no dominant strategies. And that's what triggers. Now, you'll tell me, Ranjay, even risk is scary. And you're right, risk is scary too. But uncertainty is a whole different level of scary. Because you don't know. And that is something that and I think your early polling that Colin did kind of reveals that among yourselves as well. So now the question is, if we're dealing with uncertainty, we can succumb to fear, which will lead to the freeze, my response, freeze, or flight, duck, occasionally fight. But some people act in spite of fear. Think about the lion in The Wizard of Oz. All he wants is courage. And he finally gets to the wizard and says, "Wizard, give me courage." And the wizard said, but you already have courage. But the lion said, but I'm scared. He said, just because you're scared doesn't mean you're not courageous. You still kept moving, still kept taking action, still kept helping your friends. So that's where courage or guts or boldness lives. It's the ability to act in spite of fear. Now, the question that came to my mind was, are you born courageous or can you become courageous? Now, some of you entrepreneurs will say, oh, you're born courageous. I mean, I was always an entrepreneur. I was born courageous. I always could do it myself. Maybe you're lucky. You're one of the few. What I discovered in all my research was people resource themselves to take courageous action. First of all, courage is a muscle. You develop it over time. And the other is that people actually find ways to resource themselves to act with courage. This is not something that happens overnight. And by the way, this is what the latest Harvard Business Review had to say. If you're still not sure, this is a topic relevant to all of us. We are immersed in an uncertainty crisis that demands a degree of courage we have not yet built. So that's where we are. And I didn't plan writing my book this way, but this is where we are. So the whole project here was, what enables people and organizations to behave with extraordinary courage? How do they kind of talk themselves into doing bold things? I'm just, today I was interviewing an entrepreneur who has successfully built up a business, very, very successful business. He, in fact, is thinking about IPOing it next year. But he has a bet the firm decision to make, which is completely pivot his business into an AI play. But it's going to cost him a ton of money. It's going to completely hollow out the earning streams that he has in the current business. So one camp in his company is saying, stay the course. We just need to kind of keep going 6-8 months and we'll IPO this thing. We're going to have a great valuation. But he sees a once in a lifetime opportunity where if they move fast and big, they can win big. Some of us will say, listen, man, you see the IPO, you can see it, smell it, feel it, touch it. Go for that. Do your big bets after you're done with that. That's not how he thinks. He says you got to have a winning mindset. Winning mindset. So let's think about, how do you cultivate this kind of winning, bold, courageous mindset? So in the book, I talk about 3, I would call, facets of courage. The first one is individual level. How do I kind of just resource myself? Another one is relational. How do I do it with the help of others around me? And collective is, how do I get my team and even my entire organization kind of bought into it? So individual, relational, and collective. So let's think about individual. I was recently in London and I went to the War Museum. If you haven't been there, I would strongly advise you go check it out. It's where Winston Churchill and his cabinet met through the entire war in this underground bunker. And Churchill famously said, fear is a reaction, courage is a decision. But it sounds really nice, but what do I do with that? So it doesn't help us figure out what to do with it. So let's look at I'm going to take a non-entrepreneurship example here. This is, but it'll help us see how people marshal courage by the self-talk we engage in, even in crisis moments. So this is, USA was 1549. It's a beautiful winter day, sunny, no winds, clear day. And the flight is a standard flight going from LaGuardia to Charlotte, North Carolina. They 3:24 p.m. in the afternoon, they take off. And then I can tell you as a pilot myself, what happened. One of the worst things that can happen to you is engine failure soon after takeoff. They're 3,000 feet above New York City. and they're trying to figure out what to do. So for the next 60 seconds, they try to turn the engine on, and after that fails because they turn the ignition on, hoping the engine will relight. Doesn't work. They radio Mayday to the New York terminal radar, and they say, listen, we got to come back. And immediately says, return to LaGuardia, but they discover they can't do it. They're not high enough to make the turn and get back to LaGuardia. They discover that they can't even go straight and land in New Jersey at Teterboro. So the only option that they have to decide within 45 seconds is land in the Hudson River. Now, no pilot had ever done this before successfully. You're not really trained for it either, nor do you work on simulators trying to kind of land planes on water. One time, Ethiopian Airlines had tried to do it because they had a failure, and the plane landed sideways a little bit, and the whole plane flipped over, and most people died on that. So that's Captain Sullenberger, right? What does he do? How does he do it? And let's think of what he says. The first thing he says is, I had to stay calm. Now, it turns out there's a body of research for everything I'm going to tell you. I'll show you some research as well. There's a body of research on how to stay calm called emotional self-regulation. The biggest users of that research are sports psychologists and professional athletes. Because that's the entire job of the psychologist, is to keep the player calm even when the things are like you have 3 double faults in a row, stay calm, right? You missed three putts in a clutch tournament, stay calm. How do you stay calm? So there's a body of work on this. It turns out one of the ways in which people stay calm is ritual. Rituals force you, like in their case, checklist. What's our checklist? Let's just go through our checklist. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're trying to kind of summon calm by working through a monotonous, routinized, normalized checklist. Another one is redirecting focus away from the crisis to what else you might be doing right now. Focusing on the process. So let me give you an example of that. You know, if you look at Katie Ledecky, famous athlete, Olympic medalist, multiple medals. When she's stressed out, what does she do? She recites her grandmother's name. Right? Adele, is, even though amazing singer, is scared of singing on stage. What does she do before she goes on stage? She looks at a picture of Celine Dion. So most people look for ways to dampen their fear. This is, and you might say, Ranjay, I knew that, but there's actually a science to dampening fear using rituals and redirection. It's not just that, will yourself, come on, be calm. Doesn't work. So there is a technology to wanting to be calm. The next piece of it you will catch from what he has to say. So this is what he says. My entire life, I realized my entire life up to that moment had been a preparation to handle that particular moment. Now, what does that mean, really? I found that some successful people who are able to take bold action in the face of uncertainty, they reframe how they see the situation and how they see themselves. This is my moment. This is our hero moment. Back to the entrepreneur I told you I was interviewing, he has told his team, this is a once in a lifetime. This is our opportunity. If ever you are waiting for an inflection point in the world, now is it. Are we going to take it, or are we going to sit on the sidelines and let somebody else do it? So it's how the self-talk, the narrative you create for yourself. Some of us have a very debilitating narrative. Others have a very affirming narrative. In his case, he said, I realized this was it, my Olympic moment. What's the narrative? What's the talk? In organizations too, this particular entrepreneur I talked about, that's the talk in the organization. Winning spirit. We're going to play to win. And this is our moment. Similarly, here you have Sully saying, this is my moment. Right? Because what that does is it helps you see the situation through a lens of meaning, and it helps you see yourself as critical in that situation. How do we change our story? In fact, in another study I did, I found that some of the most impactful entrepreneurs were ones who didn't define themselves by a product or an idea, but something bigger than an idea. It was, I want to change the way this market operates. I want to change the way the world does things. I'm about something bigger than just a widget or an idea. So this framing propels us and dampens our fear as well. So this is the other way, self-talk to dampen fear. The first was calming ourselves. The second one is self-talk. The third one is can-do mindset. In this study, a Stanford researcher invited a bunch of students who signed up for the study who were terrified of snakes. And he was going to make them hold a corn snake. This is a picture of a corn snake. These things don't bite, they're harmless, but they're 6 feet long and they look pretty scary. Anyway, half the students in the study dropped out. But the other half stuck it out and were not only able to touch the snake, hold the snake, but actually put it around their neck. And these were people who couldn't even be in a room with a snake. They are technically known as ophidiophobes. What is interesting is not only did these kids learn to hold a snake and overcome their fear of snakes, but they also develop this generalized can-do mindset. Right? I mean, that's what I discovered. So this Stanford researcher calls this self-efficacy. Do I believe in myself? And some of the most successful entrepreneurs I've seen, this is a hallmark of entrepreneurs. Right? Self-belief. How do we cultivate self-belief? Turns out there's a body of research on this as well. So that's an entire chapter, starting with the Stanford study, but others as well, on how do we cultivate can-do. So I've talked about 3 things to you, right? The first one is calm. There's a chapter on how do you stay calm, right? The second one I talked about was kind of self-narrative. The chapter I've written on self-narrative. And then self-belief. Now, as entrepreneurs, you say, Ranjay, I knew that. I think we know it. We may do it instinctively and intuitively somehow. But what if we could be intentional and deliberate about it? You can really build those muscles. And those muscles directly lead to being able to take bold action in the face of uncertainty and fear. Look at what Sully said. I knew I could do it. I knew I could do it. Right? So this raises that question. As an entrepreneur, you can ask yourself all 3 questions. Right? How do I stay calm in the face of uncertainty and fear? Right? How do I change my story for myself and for the team as well? So we really are not thinking about just an idea or a widget, or something bigger than that. And the third one is, how do we cultivate this self-efficacy, can-do mindset? So that was the first one. How do I resource? And I skipped a couple of them as well. There's 6 of them actually, and I just kind of, in the interest of time, stayed with a few of these. The next one is relational. And this, again, going back to Hollywood, I found, the Hollywood stereotyping of courage is wonderful, very attractive, fun to watch. Jason Bourne, James Bond. But it perpetuates not only a myth of where these people are born courageous, but they're also alone. Right? They don't want anybody. Rambo wants to go alone. Right? James Bond is doing his own thing. So they somehow are able to do it alone. Well, guess what I discovered? Most courageous people don't do it alone. They have with them what I call a support squad. Not with them physically, not always, but emotionally and otherwise connected wise, yes. And that squad boosts up their courage muscle. So let me talk specifically what kinds of support, because I'm looking now at social science research on support, to understand what are the kinds of support that help individuals behave with courage. Well, it turns out and by the way, this is in your shoes, I'd be thinking about how do I leverage venture capital or private equity, wherever you're taking the money from. The first one is we look for instrumental cash. Give me money or give me some form of resources. The second one is informational support. Give me information that I could use. Third one is emotional support. Boost me up. Help me deal with setbacks. Help me lean forward even if we have some failures. And the final one is feedback. Give me feedback. No one's giving me feedback. It's lonely up here. There's a reason people say it's a lonely job. I want feedback so I can do better. So I discovered that courage is not a solo affair. It's a collective story, and there are definitive pathways to getting support. So one of the questions you can ask yourself is, think of the people to whom you can reach out for support. And what kind of support do you need more of? And finally, who can you support to help them be more courageous? The last one, which to me was interesting, is collective courage. The gist of the idea here is that you can build that courage muscle for your team and for your organization as well. What I would call playing to win, a winning mindset. Many organizations talk about this, kind of like a winning mindset, right? Assuming you can do it, I got a whole chapter, actually there's 3 chapters on various facets of how do you foster collective courage. But I will say a few things over here right now, we won't go through all of that, is when you are operating in an environment of collective courage, you feel accountable of what happens around us, you're confident you can have an impact, and you're willing to act. Now, how do you do it? So I'm not going to race through 3 chapters in 5 minutes with you, but I'll just point out, strategic focus, organization, culture, purpose. All these things are levers available, and organizations use them to build that collective courage muscle. Because courage, then, I told you, allows you to take action in the face of fear, which is triggered by uncertainty. And if you do it right, you can inspire, you can unite, you can mobilize. So, let me try to bring this discussion together. And then I'm going to open it up for some Q&A. I think Colin will help moderate that. But let's kind of think about what I have discussed with you. I've talked about first, our lives are rife with uncertainty. Uncertainty triggers fear. I'm the first one to raise my hand. Fear triggers not fight or flight. It's freeze, flight, and maybe fight. And if you don't believe me, look at a classic example of that was Salman Rushdie, who's on stage giving a lecture, and some gentleman jumps up from onto the stage and starts stabbing him. And Salman freezes. He's written an entire book about just that moment. Like what was going on in his head and why he froze, and what's a great book. All around this idea that he couldn't take action. The word courage itself, core, which is about action in the face of fear. Even Nelson Mandela talked about it, as so did so many others. The fundamental premise of this entire project is we can become courageous. And we can resource ourselves to become courageous, and we can build that muscle up. And I would like to submit, courage is the currency for success today. In times of uncertainty, most of us are going to be immobilized by fear. The few who are not will break away. So courage isn't rare. It's quietly everywhere. It's in you too. It belongs to all of us. So to me, as I wrote this book, it was really about democratizing courage, making it accessible to everybody. Some people have intuitively figured it out, instinctively. So I had to piece together this framework, by the way. No one person said, Ranjay, you're writing a book on courage. Let me tell you the the 6 plus 3 C's and bang, 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 bang. No. It was really piecing together from their story, how they overcame fear, what did they have to do. Then I connected it to the social science to say, like, is there science to back it up? But I would love to convince you, if I have, I hope I have, is that courage is in you too. It belongs to all of us. And finally, courage is, the Dalai Lama wrote the foreword to the book, and he said, courage is an inner journey to be taken one step at a time. So final commitments. I'm an action person. I hope you got something out of this talk, but I want to turn it into actions, like immediate actions. Do one small act that scares you a little. Just whatever. Be a courageous leader by making others feel safe enough to be bold. This will enhance your relational courage, allowing others around you to be bold. And finally, build collective courage. And if you do all these things, courage is within reach. So I will just end, with a short kind of my own anecdote in this regard. I told you I had my own struggles with courage. And so soon after I came to the US, I must have been from 14, which I told you about myself, I must have been like now 20. And one of my biggest fears was heights. So I don't know if I was trying to prove something to myself, but I decided to take flying lessons. And I was terrified, but then I met the instructor, and he'd been doing this for 25 years, and he said, I'll be with you on the plane, don't worry. I was like, I got it. I was okay as long as he was on the plane for the first 30 odd hours that we flew. I learned to fly. I was good. Jerry, I knew if I screw up, he's going to fix it. He's not a suicidal guy. He doesn't want to die. He wants to have a long life. So the incentives are aligned. So one day I show up on a Sunday, and normally you do solo. Solo is flying without the instructor on the plane after 50, 100 hours usually. I'm at 35 hours. And it's in the instructor's interest to keep you prolong and delay that, because once you do solo, you don't need the instructor that much anymore. His billing goes down. So one day I show up on Sunday morning. I said, hey, Jerry, how you doing? I had a lesson lined up with him. I said, excited to go up, beautiful day. And he says, Ranjay, you're going to go solo today. I said, no, solo? I said, are you crazy? No way am I going solo. I said, Jerry, let's do that later, another time. I'm not ready for it. He said, no, I think you're ready. I said, I don't think I'm ready. I said, okay, how about next week? I'm trying to push this thing out. He's like, no. It's a beautiful day. No winds, clear skies. Today's the day. I'll never forget that day, because I'm on the plane and I look to my left and I see, to my right and I see no Jerry. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So he had forced it on me. I had to calm myself down. I took out the checklist. I pretended that he was there. I'm doing I'm doing Adele, I'm doing Katie Ledecky, reciting somebody's name, saying something, praying to a higher power. I am ignoring, avoiding, kind of distracting myself away from the fact that he's not there. I have him on radio, I'm pretending that he's there. And then I asked myself, I signed up to do this to show myself I can do it. I better do it. So self-talk kicks in, right? So calming is happening, self-talk is happening, right? And then he gets on the radio and he's now my resource. He says, I'm going to walk you through this. I can see the plane. You're going to fly only around the airfield. So you're not going far away. I'm going to be able to see you visually the entire time. I got you. So, I think I realized that being an entrepreneur is a risky business, but it's an uncertain business. How do we resource ourselves to dampen and tame that fear? That's the entire premise of this project, that we can resource ourselves to face our inevitable fear. I'm going to stop at this point. Thank you for patiently listening to me. We're going to open it up for Q&A. Colin, back to you. And I'm going to stop sharing.
Amazing. Ranjay, first and foremost, the chat is blowing up with so much appreciation. I needed this today. This is so powerful. This is amazing. Love this idea. So, first off, you really got everyone fired up. So, amazing job. And thanks for sharing some of the insights of your book. It's amazing stuff and definitely applicable to the entrepreneurial landscape. We've got some questions in the Q&A box, and if you haven't asked a question in it yet, please do so, and we'll try our best to get to them all. So, Ranjay, we're going to start at the top of the key. How can a sole business owners find opportunities to thrive in down markets?
So here you need to understand, and it ties to this research as well, um, is that most people, first of all, you have to be, we're always trying to do what others are not doing, right? There's some benefits to being contrarian. Everybody will tell you. And there's actually data on what is called the churn index that now they do it in large companies, not so much on small company data because it's hard to get small company data, but the churn index shows that the best time to leapfrog competition is not up markets, it's down markets. Now, you have to conserve resources too. So what these companies do is they do cut costs, but they don't just cut costs. They may overly cut more costs to free up some resources to deploy. They have a growth plan that this too shall end and we gotta have a growth plan. So don't just go into pure play survival mode. So the best way is to lean into looking for opportunities for growth while you're doing that. But so some companies they'll go and acquire somebody, right? They'll look in pulling away customers from other competitors who are not doing an aggressive job anymore, right? Doubling down on talent, finding the best talent who's other companies are shedding. So looking for ways to say, yes, we need to manage costs, yes, we need to survive, but we're going to do something else as well. It's not easy. It sounds easy. Only 9% of companies do it. So there's a number for you to ponder. 9%.
Awesome. Another question here. For those of us who are solopreneurs who've been lifelong perfectionists, proud of mostly every choice we make after researching every little thing, but making far fewer decisions than we ought to. Could you mention any strategies that may help this perfectionist mentality?
That's a great question. So I'm sorry, I'm summarizing entire chapters in my book in like 5 lines, 10 lines. So I'm not doing full justice to it. I'm not asking you to go read it, but let me share with you one chapter where I actually take this issue head on. And the research I draw upon is actually by a very famous University of Michigan professor, Carl Weick. And Carl had the observation that when people lack full information, they tend to hold on and wait till they get all the information. It's called plan and then act, right? We want to plan and then take action. Like you said, perfectionist. Sometimes you don't have that choice. And the example he uses actually is firefighters. So, if a building is on fire, a firefighter doesn't have the option to wait around and see, let me get more data, let me get more information, and then I'll go into the building. But he or she is also not reckless and running into the building blindly either, right? They'll get killed. So what they do is very interesting. Before they go in, they look outside and they try to get whatever information they can get. Is there combustible material that will explode over here? Are there people needing to be rescued? How quickly is the fire burning? How much time do I think I approximately might have before there is a structural collapse? Gather whatever they can. They don't have it all, and then they go into the building. As soon as they go in, they gather more data, right? And they update their hypotheses, right? And then they revise their plan. And then they go in and go in and go in. And the phrase I love that he uses is, sometimes you have to act your way into knowing. Instead of knowing before acting, Sometimes you have to act your way into knowing. Something to think about. Perfectionists will know before they act. Act your way, and you make mistakes along the way. But they're small mistakes, and you course correct. It's the way ancient mariners used to navigate. They didn't just say, I'm crossing the Atlantic, off we go into the. They didn't even know if the world was round. They were doing point to point. Let me see where land might be. I'm going to sail for 3 days, and if there's no land, I'm turning back. I'm going to go somewhere else and sail for 3 days, come back. And eventually somebody found land. Okay, there's land there. Now I go there. From there, where do I go next? So this kind of exploratory acting your way into knowing is something to think about.
That's a way better statement than fake it till you make it, but I think it's along the same lines. Let's see. The question here. So your book talks a lot about how to deal with this fear freeze moment, and entrepreneur here is asking how do entrepreneurs get over fearing investors?
Okay. Great question. I'm watching the comments coming in as well, by the way,
Yeah, I
and some
know they're loving
fantastic
it. They're
comments
loving
coming
all
in.
of it.
Really,
It's
really
fantastic.
enjoying that. Thank you for doing that. And but let me add a little bit over here that you may want to think about. Um, Repeat the question again, Colin. I was looking at the comments
Oh
and
yeah,
I
how
wasn't
can
able
bold
to.
entrepreneurs get over their
Yes,
fear of
investors.
investors?
I want to go back to what I said about can do and self efficacy. It's not fake it till you make it. I don't like that personally. I'm not a fan of
No,
that
yeah, I like
personally.
yours more. Know before, act before.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
But I would go back to self efficacy. I'll give you two or three things that I think investors look for. Besides, they look for the team. Is the team good? What is their background? La 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 la. Do they get along? All that, blah 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 blah. You got that. I think what they look for when they see somebody in the eye and say, does this person have a can-do mindset? I got it. No matter what comes my way, I'll figure it out. I got it. Right? And by the way, let me show you how many failures I've been through, setbacks I've been through. I always come through. I got it. You might call it resilience, you may call it that. Can do. Right? That's the one thing. The second thing, when I said to you about how do you change your narrative? When your narrative is, I'm here to change and transform the way this market operates, versus, I have a widget, I have an idea for you, I'm going to build a two-sided marketplace that does blah, 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 blah. No, no. I want to transform the way this entire market operates. Etsy, when it began, wasn't about, I have a two-sided marketplace for craft people to sell to individuals who want to buy crafts. No. He was like, I want to provide a place for craftsmen from all over the world, like myself, to be able to economically sell their wares. And I want to transform their lives, and I want to transform the buyers' lives. And I believe I can do that through a real market. It wasn't, I got a two-sided market. Let me show you that.
Yeah.
And when you have that expansive notion of yourself, and by the way, we are in a unique inflection point right now with a technological change that is a once in a lifetime change. And so you have an expansive story for yourself. They will love you. You don't have to go loving them, and you don't have to worry about them. And you need to then find investors who share your conviction, because conviction also builds courage.
It's terrific advice. Better advice than many VCs I've heard say some stuff around that recently. All right. There's a question here from Ramona. Is mental rehearsal an option, like imagining an outcome, or is meditation useful?
Great questions. Look, mental rehearsal definitely helps, but mental rehearsal or scenario planning only helps in risk management, because risk is where you know the distribution of outcome. Uncertainty that I don't know. I really don't know, what is going to happen here. I don't know. I don't know how fast AI adoption is going to lead to a positive ROI story for my company. I don't know. All I know is my fixed costs are pretty high, and my variable cost of the computation capacity that I have to buy is pretty high too. But I don't know if it's going to convert into revenue growth or cost savings. I don't know. So I don't know. So, you can do mental rehearsals over there, but it's not going to help you that much. Now, what people do around fear management, which you see in airline, all the airlines have these programs for people who are scared of flying. These are kind of sensitivity trainings to kind of sensitize you to dealing with fear. Back to, what you heard Tom Cruise saying. It's not that I'm not scared, I'm okay with being scared. How do we build that comfort with fear? So you can do a bit of that. I'm a huge fan of meditation. I meditate myself every day. So full disclosure, um, it's a centering device. It's a way to center ourselves. It also is a way to connect to our own purpose. My last book was called Deep Purpose, by the way, and I really learned how purpose unlocks huge possibility because it reminds us why I am here. And when we have a purpose for ourselves, it unleashes possibility. So I didn't want to rehash my previous book in this book, but I think actually, purpose is an unlock into courage. I've been asked this question a few times. Why do you write purpose first and then you wrote courage? Are they connected or not? And they are. And I think meditation is a great place to center ourselves. And there's physiological benefits of meditating as well. So in a line of work like you, entrepreneurship is a one hell of a roller coaster ride. How do I stay calm in a real roller coaster ride? I think you can do a lot.
Amazing. Another question. It's a thin line between being courageous and being crazy. We're a fintech that can help lift people out of debt. Um, our story does not seem to click because the solution does not exist today. So by telling people that we can transform the debt service industry doesn't cut it. What do you recommend when bringing a totally new solution to market?
Um, so first, let me start by pointing out that even the first essay I could find on courage was actually Aristotle's essay, and Aristotle made a distinction between he had on the one extreme cowardice, other extreme he had was reckless, and in the middle he had was courage. I'm not at all implying that you're being reckless here, by the way. I do believe that you gotta have conviction and belief in your idea that there is a market out there for it. And when you believe in that idea deeply, and you're willing to walk into the fog, act your way into knowing. You may not have the answer. My guess is from just what little you've described to me, you may not have it fully figured out yet. But you can't wait on the sidelines trying to figure it out before you're going to take action. The question is, can you act your way into knowing? Can you take small steps, try something, see if it works, proof of concept, pilot, whatever you want to call those things, right? And sharpen and refine and refine and refine till you land on what may be a viable solution. I'm not sure, again, I don't know enough. How much rapid iterating have you done? Have you done a pilot? Have you done an exploratory analysis? How have you done it? And I think doing to know is the unlock I would like to suggest to you with incomplete information. What you're trying to do has massive upside and is serving a real social need. The challenge for these kinds of business ideas, social entrepreneurs, social ventures, is how do you make them economically viable, right? That is the key. How do you build economic viability into that? And if you can't, then you got to really rethink it because you're not going to be able to easily just keep funding a social venture, and the appetite of investors is no longer what it used to be around that around that type of investing.
Yep. Wow, that's great advice. Because yeah, you still need revenue customers to survive, whether you're in an up or down market. So, let's see. Another question here. Is self-talk more powerful than ritual? Like, where would you put them on a scale?
Um, Interesting. Self-talk, ritual. Each does something different. Ritual is simply dampening fear, right? Is dampening the fear response. Self talk is I'm going to take action in spite of fear. So they're coming at it differently. So you got to, I think you need both. You need to reduce fear and also the capacity to act in the face of fear. It's like
Great.
jumping or learning to do a pole vault. I want to lower the bar, and I want to learn how to jump over the bar. So you got to do a bit of both.
Love that. And then I know we're almost at time, and you gave us a key takeaway, so we'll run through some of these other questions, but chat again is going so crazy. Everyone's loving all of this. Let's see. There is a question here on, can you give us an example on act your way into knowing?
Sure. Actually, I have one I have a whole chapter on this in my book where I talk about both business ventures that have acted their way into knowing. I also give the example of the Fukushima plant where there was a tsunami devastation and how the plant manager, not knowing what to do, acted his way into figuring out how to get power back up with only hours to spare, or they would have had another meltdown over there. So there's a whole bunch, and I also kind of have tried to kind of detail kind of how we can resource ourselves to act in the face of no information.
Amazing. Well, Ranjay, thank you so much for sharing your time and a bunch of your research from the book. We're going to drop the link in the chat just in case you want to get a copy. Get it today. It just came out hot off the press. But Ranjay, thank you so much for joining us today to share more about your book, your journey, and just so much advice for the entrepreneurs in our audience today.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. I'm a huge fan of entrepreneurs. And so I want to applaud you all for doing what you're doing, and I want to wish you all the best. So thank you very much.
Amazing, Ranjay. And for those of you still on, thank you for joining us, and we hope this was insightful. We've got a bunch of webinars coming up in the next couple of weeks, so check those out in the follow-up and the links and also in the chat. But on behalf of everyone on our team, thank you, Ranjay, for joining us, and of course, for all the attendees who joined us today. We look forward to welcoming you all back online soon. Thanks
And
again, everyone.
thank you, Colin. And anyone can send questions to me on LinkedIn. So I'm happy to answer questions, follow ups. If you like, there's a newsletter that breaks down pieces in bite size also on LinkedIn. So all that information is there if you don't want to read the book.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Ranjay, and good luck with the rest of the book launch, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye bye.